Have you ever heard of a global apocalypse that happened 3,200 years ago? No, this isn't a sci-fi movie plot. It's one of history's greatest mysteries, the Great Bronze Age Collapse. Around 1200 BCE, not one, not two, but over 40 advanced civilizations across the Mediterranean and Near East simultaneously fell apart. Mighty empires like the Egyptians, the Hittites, and the Mycenaean Greeks, which had stood for centuries, crumbled into dust in just a few decades. What could cause such a widespread, catastrophic domino effect? Let's unravel this ancient enigma. For centuries, this was a golden age. Imagine vast trade networks stretching from Greece to Afghanistan. Ships laden with copper from Cyprus and tin from the far west crisscrossed the seas. Chariots, the super weapons of their day, dominated battlefields. Scribes in magnificent palaces recorded harvests, treaties, and epic poems. Cities like Ugarit in Syria were bustling cosmopolitan hubs where dozens of languages were spoken. The world was interconnected, prosperous, and seemed invincible. But beneath this shimmering surface, the seeds of destruction were already being sown. Our first major clue is climate change. Scientists studying ancient pollen, lake beds, and ice cores have uncovered evidence of a mega drought that struck the region around 1200 BCE. This wasn't just a dry summer, it was a climatic shift that lasted for decades, perhaps even a century. Rains failed, rivers dried up, and harvests withered. For civilizations built entirely on agriculture, this was a death sentence. Widespread famines swept across the land. We have desperate letters from kings begging their neighbors for grain shipments to stave off starvation. The Hittite queen wrote to the pharaoh of Egypt, "I have no grain in my lands." When the foundation of your society food disappears, everything else starts to crack. This agricultural crisis triggered the next domino, economic collapse. The sophisticated trade networks that defined the Bronze Age were incredibly fragile. They depended on surplus goods, political stability, and safe sea lanes. With famine raging, there was no surplus to trade. Nations turned inward, hoarding what little they had. The international system, which had brought prosperity for centuries, ground to a halt. The flow of copper and tin, essential for making bronze the very material that defined the era, was severed. Without bronze for tools and weapons, armies weakened and infrastructure decayed. The globalized economy of the Bronze Age shattered, and each kingdom was left to fend for itself in a world spiraling out of control. As societies weakened from within, they became vulnerable to threats from without. Imagine millions of starving, desperate people. What do? They move. This period saw massive, unprecedented migrations of people searching for food and a new home. These displaced populations weren't just peaceful migrants. They were armies on the move, desperate and willing to fight for survival. Cities that couldn't feed their own people were suddenly faced with waves of refugees and invaders at their gates. Walls were breached, palaces were burned, and entire populations were scattered. The social order completely broke down. And this brings us to the most mysterious and debated figures in this entire saga, the Sea Peoples. Egyptian inscriptions from the time describe a terrifying coalition of seafaring raiders who swept down from the north, leaving a trail of pure destruction. The pharaoh Ramses III described them in a panic. No land could stand before their arms. They laid their hands upon the lands as far as the circuit of the earth, their hearts confident and trusting. We see them in carvings as feathered helmeted warriors with their families in tow on ox carts, suggesting they weren't just pirates, but a migrating people. Who were the Sea Peoples? Their exact origins remain a puzzle. Scholars suggest they could have been a confederation of displaced groups from across the Aegean and Mediterranean, perhaps Mycenaean Greeks whose own civilization had collapsed, or people from Sardinia, Sicily, or Anatolia. They weren't a single nation, but a symptom of the chaos. They were the human face of the collapse, a tidal wave of destruction born from climate change and famine. They sacked mighty cities like Hattusa, the Hittite capital, and Ugarit, burning them to the ground so thoroughly that they were never re-inhabited. So, let's put it all together. It wasn't one single event, but a perfect storm, a catastrophic systems collapse. A prolonged drought led to famine. Famine destroyed the economy and destabilized governments. Weakened states couldn't control their own people or defend their borders. This chaos unleashed waves of migrants and raiders, the sea peoples who acted as the final wrecking ball, toppling civilizations that were already teetering on the brink. Each collapse sent shock waves through the system, accelerating the fall of its neighbors. It was a domino effect on a geopolitical scale. In the aftermath, the world was plunged into a dark age. The great empires were gone. Writing was lost in many regions for hundreds of years. Cities were abandoned and populations plummeted. The vibrant, interconnected world of the Bronze Age vanished, replaced by smaller, isolated, and impoverished communities. It took centuries for civilization to recover and for new powers, like the Assyrians, the Phoenicians, and eventually the Greeks and Romans, to rise from the ashes. The story of the Bronze Age collapse is more than just ancient history. It's a chilling warning for our own time. It shows how even the most advanced and interconnected civilizations are vulnerable. It demonstrates how climate change can be a catalyst for social breakdown, conflict, and mass migration. Our globalized world, with its complex supply chains and dependence on a stable climate, has eerie parallels to the world of 1200 BCE. The fall of these 40 civilizations reminds us that progress is not guaranteed, and the systems we rely on are more fragile than we think. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey into one of history's greatest mysteries. What do you think was the main cause? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the past, please hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next historical investigation. Until next time, stay curious.